I'm Carl Kurtz. I'm standing in the middle of a prairie area that's on our family farm in Marshall County. So we would be in northwest Marshall County. About 50 years ago, I was really introduced to the prairie by Roger Landers, who was a botanist at Iowa State University. And with a background in wildlife biology, I began to see that this is probably some of the very best wildlife habitat there is. So over the course of years, we came to the conclusion that we could take some of our cropland, pasture land, and convert it to diverse wildlife prairie. And it's been the most interesting part of life. This has been a family farm. My father bought it in 1930. I don't know how he managed to pay for it because that was the crash of 1929 and 30. So, but anyway, and it was a diverse family farm like most places. We had hogs and pigs and chickens, raised a lot of your own food and and corn, but there were no soybeans then. Hay crops, and I can remember one year we even combined red clover for seed, which was pretty unusual, but it was a really good learning experience about land, just growing up on a farm, and about working with equipment. And that really helped me too, because to plant the prairie, you need equipment and you need ideas. There wasn't too much of that being done. And so through this professor, we actually rented a chunk of virgin prairie and combined it in 1980. And that was the first part of the planting. And we could see afterwards what began to develop. And then we ended up harvesting virgin prairie, or a chunk of virgin prairie that we had leased for 20 years after that, and used that to plant most of our areas. So we're on the edge of an area that's about 100 acres. It takes some real effort just to manage it, to get it going. And then, management is a really big deal with prairie. You can't just plant it and say, well, I've got it planted and now I can do whatever I want. It won't make any difference. It's a full-time job, quite frankly. So to plant it, the easiest thing to do is, if you can start with really weed-free cropland, that's the easiest way, because you're not going to have the weed competition you would have if it was an abandoned field. Usually we'd plant in the winter or late fall. And then in the spring, you come along and grows up, usually weedy, with little plants, usually maybe an inch or two high. And even by late summer, they might only be 6 inches high. And so you'd basically keep it mowed the first year. And depending on the weather conditions, you might have to mow it the second year. And the first time we had a really good start at this, we ended up with a lot of plants the third year. There was nothing the first year. It was so dry. Nothing the second year. And then the plants came up. And by the fourth year, we were able to combine it for seed. And off of that first acre, we got 50 pounds of seed. And we thought that was really amazing. After that, we continued to plant every year more and more acres, usually never more than 10 acres at a time, because it was keeping up with the management. Weed control, you had to walk it or monitor it or do something to keep track of the weeds in every area every year. We often had interns, summer interns, and they helped us, and that has made a big difference too. This part I'm standing is probably about 15 years old. It's taken quite a while for it to really develop. Often we've overseeded areas that were planted, maybe even 10 or 15 years, we might overseed them with other seed. And combining seed off a virgin prairie, you never get the same seed mix 2 years in a row. And we don't here either, depending on the weather, depending on just a whole lot of things, whether or not you got it burned. Burning tends to really enhance flowering and enhances the quality of the seed. Generally, yeah, we always burn in the spring, usually from the end of March or early April until about the end of April. Usually not much later than that. Okay, what you're looking at right here, the pink flowers are showy tick trefoil. It's a legume, and the white ones are rattlesnake master. The grasses here is a compass plant leaf, which probably doesn't show up. It's not really flowering this year. And you have to remember, like plants, just like fruit trees, they don't put out seed and flowering every year. So they're storing food in their roots. And then when the conditions are really good, maybe because of rain or because of fire, then the plants will just really put out seed and grow up bigger and more. There's a lot more flowering. So fire is a really important part. And I would tell everybody, if you have a prairie, try to burn it just about every year for the first 10 years. Then you can let it go for a year or two at a time. But if you don't, it's probably not going to do as well. A lot of the seeds are fire scarified, and the germination is much higher after fire. So you want to plant it. Usually it'll be the third or fourth year before you can burn it because there's not enough fuel to carry a fire. After that, burn it continuously every spring for at least, say at least 5 years, and 10 years probably would be better. We have areas we burned for more than 20 straight years. They are the most diverse, most productive areas. We've only surveyed it as a whole. So we have about 150 native species, which is very good. You got to remember, you're got to be in it for the long haul. It's not something you plant for 1 year and then you plow it up 10 years later. In 10 years, it's just getting started at doing what it will do best, and the diversity will start to get really good. And I think that's one of the issues with CRP. You have a 10-year CRP and then, oh, I'll just plow it up and plant. It's so easy to undo a prairie. It wouldn't be that easy to undo a woods, and you wouldn't even think about it. But a prairie, you don't see it as a living community that could be, well, virgin prairies would be thousands of years old. And so they're just getting started when people end up plowing them up and replanting them. Harvesting it for seed is probably a good thing. You could also hay it. That would be a good thing. It might remove some of the weedy problems, especially I've seen prairies that were hayed, and generally they're very free of sweet clover. Sweet clover is a real problem. Probably doesn't hurt the prairie too much, but it can eventually almost take it over, and it just doesn't look very good. It doesn't look like a prairie anymore. I would say we probably have, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 different bird species that nest here consistently. Then you have the small mammals, voles and deer mice and white-footed mice and western harvest mice and shrews, a couple of species of shrews, badgers, 13-line ground squirrels. We've got skunks, garter snakes, fox snakes, decay snakes. It's a real diverse mixture of plants and animals, and they're all kind of subsisting and working together. So we are on the very edge, the eastern edge of the Wisconsin glacial lobe. So we have rocks. We have boulders. We've dug some of them up. We've moved some of them. And 2 miles east of us is the edge of the landscape. And then there's no rocks. So it's a different soil. This would be Clarion Webster soil. East of us would be Tama Muscatine soil. We don't have much sand. This is really loamy. It's pretty good, really good cropland. There are no potholes right where we are, but west of us there would be prairie potholes within a couple of miles. This would be the outwash from the Wisconsin Glacier. And so we're near what's known as Minerva Creek. There's 3 branches of it, and it drains thousands of acres in Marshall and Story County. You could say I'm an educated wildlife biologist, but you don't know much when you get out of school. But if you can work with habitats, you learn so much. And I find this just endlessly fascinating what's going on. Every year is different. No 2 years look the same. And you never know what you're going to see. We find unexpected birds and animals that we did not know hardly anything about. There's just bird activity all the time. And the same is true with the prairie. We actually have some fairly rare birds that use it as migratory habitat, going north in the spring and south in the fall. And you would never find them in an open crop field. It's just so interesting. You just learn new things all the time. I mean, it makes life so much more interesting because you've always got something new to look at. There's just no end to the things that you learn about that you had no idea about in the first place. Okay, we are in the middle of our prairie area. It's about 50 acres. And if you're going to plant a prairie, the one thing you should do is put in a wetland, because it will increase the diversity of the area you have in ways you never believed possible. You'll have habitat for a collection of frogs, toads, turtles, migratory waterfowl, just things you never expected. And if you can look at this pond, which was built about 40 years ago, you can see the rings of vegetation around it. And so the vegetation, some of it we planted, some of we unintentionally planted. And again, it borders it with river bulrush, which grows out into water, usually about up to probably 8 or 10 inches deep. The next layers would be mixed with cordgrass, reed canary grass, sawtooth sunflowers, things like water lilies could be in there. And that could be really important for waterfowl. You can get nesting wood ducks, generally hooded mergansers. It's just so interesting what has happened because the vegetation is finding the right water level and the right moisture conditions, and then it will actually border the entire pond. We actually planted cattails, but because it's so low in nitrates, we have almost no cattails. And usually that's a real problem. What we found out too that was fascinating, when we first built this was farmed to the upper part. So if we got a 3 or 4 inch rain, the pond would go up 3 feet. Now, if we got a 5-inch rain, the pond would probably go up 3 or 4 inches. And so it completely changed the soil structure. And we've seen that here, and we've seen it in another prairie we worked on, that after the prairie had been there for maybe about 10 years, we got consistent water out of it. In fact, this one formed a creek below it because it was holding so much water so long. So it tells you a lot about soil compaction and how it changes the whole ecology. It's really great to restore your mental health, put it that way. there's too much going on, and just to be here with the birds that are talking and singing and flying. And in the spring, we'll often get quite a few waterfowl. So you never really know what's going to happen. That's another thing. That's the good thing about the prairie. You will never figure it all out. And I often think the longer you do this, the less you know, because it's just endlessly interesting, fascinating, and changing all the time.